And of course, there is a good reason for that. In a country that's been struggling to get economic growth kick-started, we think back to the heady days of the early mid-2000s, and that's when we did see some serious economic growth, and it was all led by infrastructure development. But the reality today is also that we look around and we see the decay. We see the evidence of infrastructure that has not been maintained. We see the evidence of infrastructure that is being stolen and stripped. And at face value, yes, it may be disruptive. It may have a negative impact on our daily lives. And looking at it from our middle-class prisms, it is an annoyance, quite apart from the eyesore. But there are people in our society for whom this is of much greater importance, because that infrastructure, or the lack thereof, speaks to a lack of access to opportunities. So we all know that for the longest time in South Africa, we've been talking about the triple threat of unemployment, inequality, and poverty. And I personally like to say that the post-apartheid apartheid of South Africa is inequality. And until we are able to address inequality in our society, the rich will not sleep. And when we say the rich, we're not talking about the super rich, the wealthy. They can find ways to actually buffer themselves from what is to come. The rich in this instance is anyone who has anything that the poor don't have, that they might need or see as a means to get themselves moving along. So infrastructure is going to be pivotal to where South Africa finds itself going to next. So ladies and gentlemen, it really is wonderful to see all of you here, and to all our guests, esteemed dignitaries amongst us, colleagues, and of course, a very warm welcome to all of you, and looking forward to some really, really thought-provoking discussions this morning. And, I looked up some stats with regard to infrastructure and inclusive growth as driven by infrastructure development. And these are just some key stats. So if we look at the impact of it, a study by the Development Bank of Southern Africa, that's DBSA, indicates that a 1% increase in infrastructure investment correlates to about 0.1% increase in economic growth in the long run. And then South Africa's infrastructure investment has now declined to below 15% of GDP in looking at the 2023 stats. But if you look at that same study also suggests that 30 to 35% investment is needed to stimulate significant economic growth in the country. So there's quite a gap there, which means we need to almost double what we are spending as a nation right now. And then in terms of job creation, so McKinsey and Company, they report that if we prioritize infrastructure and we do this in key sectors, we could add, as South Africa, 1 trillion rand to our annual GDP by, get this, 2030. That's just around the corner. And if we look at how things are moving now, it almost seems too good to be true, but there are actually reports and there's evidence to back this up. And then the role of infrastructure in poverty reduction, which is what all of this ultimately is about. Infrastructure investment, I think we all understand and we all know, will be key to reducing inequality in South Africa and also improving access to essential services for those who do not have in our society. So with that said, today's event can also be seen as a curtain raiser, so to speak, for what's to come next week. So we're laying the foundation, the groundwork, as it were, and looking forward to the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium South Africa that's taking place next week on the 26th and 27th. And this is where President Cyril Ramaphosa will also be joining Minister Dean McPherson to outline what our plans are. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, let's start the show. And first off, if I could call Mr. Lyndon Barents. Thank you so much to Arena Holdings for the venue here this morning, for hosting us for this very important dialogue. So Mr. Lyndon Barents, the Managing Director of Arena Holdings.
Good morning, everybody. On behalf of Business Day and Arena Holdings, we're happy to welcome you all here today. I see it's a thought leadership session, so I'm sure that we're going to think and apply our minds to the best of our ability. So Minister Dean McPherson, happy to have you here, Professor Dani Meyer, Mr. Lucky Sele, Mr. Dr. Hubert Joint. I'm not sure if the Auditor General is here. As well, but welcome to Takani Maluleke. It's really good to have all of you and all the other role players. Unfortunately, I can't go through all of your names, but all feel welcome and be part of laying the foundation to next week. As I reflected on what to say this morning on behalf of Arena, I just thought of my own experience, right, and the importance of infrastructure and public works. I grew up in Crossroads in Cape Town, in then what we knew as an informal settlement. Now people say it's a shack, and that's where I grew up. And I recall at 6 and 7 years old, my brother and I getting the 2 buckets, you know, like those 25-liter paint buckets, and taking the stick, and then we walk barefoot down the hill in the sand with the thorns across the little road in Crossroads there, and we get to the Methodist mission station, that's still there, and this Methodist school, and that was the only place we could get water. And then we'll fill our buckets and put the stick through it, and then walk slowly back home to ensure that we don't spill the precious water. Sadly, these inequalities are still in place in some areas in the country, so many years after our freedom. I then also recall when I was at Standard Bank and Dr. Conrad Strauss called me in, who was the chairman, and said, Madiba has asked us to build a school. Remember when Madiba was on this crusade to build schools, and I was then spearheading building a school in Matatial. Every week I flew down to Mthatha and then drove to Matatial. And we built the school for Madiba. But we decided to go one step further, and that was to ensure that we put computers and a science lab, because the chief told me that his dream was that children from those areas will become doctors and engineers and nurses. So we went a step further, and I remember when I hosted Madiba there, that the tears welled up in his eyes when we showed him that we actually went a step further. Infrastructure is so important, it's a beacon of hope to certain communities. And then he asked me again to open up his house in Vilakazi Street, number 8115 Vilakazi Street. And he said, I want this to be open to the public. And I want, and in actual fact, that was a Saturday afternoon. It was my daughter's matric ball, and we were at home, you know what it's like, the pre-matric parties, etc. When I got the call to meet with him and Dr. Motlana. And that's a Saturday afternoon. And he said, I want this house open to the public on Monday, because it must be a beacon of hope to the public. And I took a friend of mine, and we took a mop and a broom, and we went there, we cleaned up the house, and I opened the Mandela House for the first time. And subsequently, with an architect called Phil Mashabani, we renovated that house and handed it over to the city. And then my last story of infrastructure is then, similarly, him and Dr. Matlana asked me to spearhead the H.E Peterson development in Soweto. And I'm telling the story to understand that as we build these infrastructure projects, that we must involve the community. And so we appointed an engineering firm, a project management firm, to build H.E President Memorial. But we said, do not come with any workers. We brought all the street committees together in that area, and we said we're going to build this memorial, and we'd like participation from the community. So they divided the streets up in blocks and said this one will come, and we trained the bricklayers and all of that. We involved the community. We didn't lose one brick. And everybody was proud of the H.E President Memorial that is still standing there today. And so as we deliberate and as you apply your minds as far as this is concerned, and as you lay the foundation, and as you look at an index and how we must make sure that whatever we do will try and eradicate the inequalities and the poverty. But above all, these things are beacons of hope in the community. When people see bridges being built and schools being built and water come to them, they feel jubilant and they feel that they can be dignified in a manner. So our jobs as the media and your job as those working within the infrastructure is not only to build physical structures, but to be able to infuse our communities and our country with hope where there is a deficit of hope at this moment. So welcome, and I trust that you will deliberate well and that we will have a successful day and see all of us as peddlers of hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyndon Barnes, and of course, setting us up there, quite greatly for what we are going to discuss, because when we talk about inclusive growth, it means taking all of us along on this path. And love that, the stories you told us, your passion shines through, and thank you for being part of building a better South Africa. But I think more importantly for all of us, we need to build a fairer South Africa for all who live in it. Now, our next speaker is the man who will be leading the charge nationally to reposition infrastructure as a catalyst for growth and transformation in the country. Mr. Dean McPherson, Minister of Infrastructure, and I must say I've also dealt with Minister Dean McPherson for many years in the media space, and always a pleasure, and it's someone who's going to get it done. So with that said, Minister McPherson, if you will make your way up to speak to us about the importance of driving inclusive growth in South Africa, particularly at the local government level, which our following speakers will also speak to us about, but looking at how infrastructure is central to what we call this developmental state, and how the Department of Infrastructure in South Africa, what they are doing to turn policy into measurable progress. Minister.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with you this morning, and with Sakina, one of my favorite presenters. She doesn't grill me too hard, so that's why she's one of my favorite. Indeed, I'm really excited to be here this morning because, as many of you know, over the last 10 and a half months, infrastructure has really become a passion of mine, but more importantly, to see a country that is connected and a country that finds dignity through infrastructure. I think that we can all agree that the state of infrastructure in South Africa leaves many people living an undignified life. So let me begin by particularly acknowledging the work done by the University of Johannesburg School of Public Management in partnership with Infrastructure South Africa, because the development of the Local Government Inclusive Growth Index is and will be a valuable contribution to how we assess the delivery capacity of municipalities across the country and track their economic and developmental progress over time. Most importantly, it gives us a tool to help prioritize and target infrastructure investment where it will have the greatest impact on growth and delivery. As I've said repeatedly since taking office, the time for action, or the time for talking, is over, and it's now time for action. South Africa must now enter a phase of construction, delivery, and economic expansion. That's why our department, the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure in South Africa, is working to turn South Africa into a construction site, because economic growth cannot and will not happen just by chance. It will be the direct result of good planning, strong partnerships, and disciplined implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, South Africa's single biggest challenge remains its high unemployment rate. Millions of capable, willing South Africans are locked out of opportunity, not because they lack ambition, but because the economic environment has not been enabling enough for job creation and business development. This is not just an economic challenge, but I think it's time to call it a national crisis which fuels poverty, crime, social instability, and disillusionment amongst the people of this country. To overcome it, we must have a growing economy. I want to underline that. It's important. We must grow this economy at all costs. That is our focus, not just as a department, but as a government of national unity. And one of the most effective ways to grow our economy is through sustained investment in infrastructure. Around the world, infrastructure is proven as a lever for job creation, economic stimulation, and long-term growth. It raises productivity, it enables trade, and it lowers the cost of doing business, but most importantly, it improves access to opportunity. That is why we believe, and the government believes, that infrastructure must be at the heart of our economic agenda. It's not just a line item in the budget. It is the foundation for sustainable growth. Every time a new road is built, a water pipeline is laid, or a port expanded, we inject momentum into our economy. We create direct jobs, support local suppliers, we stimulate demand for materials, and we improve future investment prospects. But more than that, we build the physical networks that allow our economy to grow in a sustained, inclusive way across towns, cities, and rural areas. That is why, under the 7th administration, we are putting infrastructure delivery at the center of our economic strategy. In the budget speech this week, Minister Enoch Godongwana unveiled that our government aims to spend over 1 trillion rand on infrastructure over the medium term. It's our mission to attract an additional 100 billion rand in infrastructure investment and accelerate the implementation of construction-ready jobs. Not only will this drive growth, but it will help our country overcome the delivery backlog that has frustrated far too many people for far too long. Ladies and gentlemen, the role of local government in this mission is critical. No matter how good our plans are at a national level, delivery ultimately happens at local level. As Lyndon B. Johnson once said, that all politics is, sorry, it was Tip O'Neill, actually, the Speaker of Congress, famously said that all politics is local. That's why we must build the capacity of municipalities, strengthen coordination, and ensure that infrastructure planning is credible, funded, and ready for execution. This is precisely why the Local Government Inclusive Growth Index is so important. It allows us to see at a glance where the gaps are, where the momentum is building, and where targeted support is needed. It's not just an academic exercise, it is a practical tool for action and implementation. But data alone is not enough. It must lead to action. In our department, we are already taking steps to act faster, smarter, and more decisively. Infrastructure South Africa is helping to slash red tape, reduce project approvals from years to just 85 days. And our teams are working closely with municipalities to unlock stalled projects, get shovels into the ground, and deliver infrastructure that meets the needs of our people. Through National Treasury's Project Preparation Facility, implemented by Infrastructure South Africa, we are ensuring that more projects are properly designed, costed, and structured for investment from the get-go. This is already helping us to move plans just from plans to implementation and from promises to visible results. Through this program, we are working directly with municipalities to unlock priority infrastructure projects, deploy technical expertise, and strengthen delivery systems at a local level. This approach, ladies and gentlemen, is already showing results in several cities and towns and will be expanded to more areas in the months and years ahead. Across our country, these kinds of interventions are beginning to rebuild trust and drive local growth. But we are under no illusions. The road is not easy. Fiscal constraints are tight, capacity in many municipalities is low to non-existent, and delivery systems must be reformed. But these are not reasons to slow down. They are reasons to accelerate our efforts. That's why we are deepening our partnerships with the private sector. And the private sector is a key actor in the work that we are doing. We are working with provincial governments and international investors to crowd in more capital and more expertise. We are also working to ensure that infrastructure tender processes are free from corruption, because every cent lost to fraud or corruption is a job stolen from a young person in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot afford to delay any longer. People cannot wait any longer. They need to see progress. They need to see shovels in the ground, and they want to see cranes in the sky. They want to see their government delivering on their behalf. And that business can be a partner in all of that. Growth is not just a slogan, ladies and gentlemen. It's not an abstract concept, but it is something that is real. It is something that is visible, tangible, and executed correctly will change people's lives in our country. This is the vision we are committed to. South Africa under construction. Not just in 5 years, and not just in theory, but now, urgently. So let's use today's dialogue with some very smart people in the room. Dr. Joint has 2 doctoral degrees. I have none. I actually was where, Sakina, I was at a university. Oh, I was at Stellenbosch last week. Everyone had a doctoral degree. And I said, if you would like some more funding from our department, you're welcome to confer a doctorate on me, and that may sweeten the deal. But let us use the insights from today, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday to understand how this index can strengthen our pipeline. And I've seen it. It's unbelievable. To guide investment and to sharpen our focus to deliver. Let's also ensure that our infrastructure plans are aligned with economic goals, and that our economic goals are always grounded in real outcomes for real people. We're not just building for the sake of it. We're building to grow our economy, to create jobs, and to bring hope to every part of our country. Together, we are turning this country into a construction site, and with it, we are going to build a better future for South Africa, the country that we all so dearly love. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Minister. Thank you so much, Minister Dean McPherson. And, couldn't agree with you more, and with everything that you said, basically. And speaking of capacity, and you look at local government and the lack of capacity in so many instances. I remember a few years ago when the Secretary General of the ANC, Mr. Fikile Mbalula, was still the Minister of Transport. And I'll never forget it, because it was a Sunday afternoon, and I'm sitting at home, and I get a message, and it says, you need to go to the Vaal tomorrow for Morning Live. Minister Fikile Mbalula is going to be there, and he's going to launch a pothole closing program. And I was like, a whole national minister is coming to close potholes. And I was actually angry, and I said, I'm not going. Like, why is the national minister closing potholes when you have a municipality that's supposed to take care of that? And I must say, ultimately, I saw the bigger picture, because it came down to the lack of capacity in the municipality to do something as simple as maintain the roads, close the potholes for various reasons, including financial as well. But these are the issues, Minister, I think that will have to be addressed. But I'm going to call on the panel now, the next group of people to come and join the Minister up on stage, starting with Mr. Tsakani Manyike, who is the Acting Head of Infrastructure at the IDC, and here to look at the role of finance, among others, and development in driving infrastructure where it's most needed. So please come up, Mr. Manyike. And at the same time, I'll also call up the next group of people, Dr. Hubert Joint, who is Program Manager at Infrastructure South Africa Centre of Excellence. That will take us from finance to the technical and strategic thinking that underpins the implementation of this infrastructure. And joining the two gentlemen up here is also Professor Dani Meyer from the University of Johannesburg. And I must say, I had a cursory look at the work that you have done, and it's super exciting, especially for someone who's passionate about what happens at municipal level and so on. It's like a heat map, and it's so easy to read, and it just immediately shows you what is going on. And also, we are joined by the Executive Mayor of the city of Mogale City, Mr. Lucky Sele. So, Mr. Lucky Sele, please, if you can come up as well, identified as one of South Africa's top performing municipalities, and we'll get into the research that was done, and of course, Mogale City and how they have fared as one of those municipalities in question. So thank you so much, gentlemen. And perhaps if I could start with the IDC. Let's speak to the money first, Mr. Manyike. So driving inclusive growth through infrastructure programs and the IDC and their involvement.
Thanks, Sakina, and good morning to the Minister. Thanks for the opportunity to be part of this esteemed panel. So, yeah, from the IDC side, I think perhaps it is important for us to look at what inclusive growth means in order for us to define it, properly. So we look at inclusive growth as economic growth that is distributed fairly across society, and really creates equitable opportunities for all the citizens. And that is not just from a job opportunities only, but it is also from an ownership and meaningful participation in the economy. So from our side, obviously, I mean, we've been around for 85 years, particularly focusing on the building industrial capacity. So we have built industries, we have participated in lots of manufacturing, chemicals, as well as energy projects, and we are also now in the infrastructure space. And really, our mandate goes beyond just financial sustainability. So it's not about lending money and getting a return, but it is also about socio-economic benefits, such as job creation, as well as transformation, and really building industrial capacity of the country. So with that said, I must state that in order for us to achieve our strategic goals, it requires a lot of, assuming or taking risk that no other is willing to take. So, from an infrastructure perspective, just to echo what the Minister has just articulated now, we see it as an enabler to economic growth, particularly inclusive and sustainable economic growth. And so, as such, we do fund projects that are economic in nature, because we understand there is a sister DFI, DBSA, that does funding for social infrastructure. So from our side, we look at economic infrastructure, and that will range from water to energy to digital infrastructure, as well as transport and logistics. And really, the reason why we're doing this for us is to look at the role that infrastructure plays in the economy, and as far as fueling inclusive economic growth. If you think about it, infrastructure does provide access to markets. If there is a farm that is lying somewhere in the most rural parts of South Africa, in order for those goods to really get to the markets, you really need good infrastructure. It can be roads, it can be rail, so you do need transport and logistics infrastructure. And secondly, infrastructure does provide access to services. It can be in the form of water, in the form of electricity. I think most of us have felt, or are still even feeling, the impact of just living without electricity or just going a day without water. And that's a really lived experience for most of us. So it is for that reason that we are getting involved in funding infrastructure projects. And also, from a digital infrastructure perspective, we seek to bridge the digital divide and really enhance connectivity, because it is when our people are connected from a broadband point of view that then they get an opportunity to access other opportunities, such as it can be jobs. Even entrepreneurial opportunities are unearthed when people can connect digitally. So that is why we get involved in infrastructure. And not to mention the energy security, which is key to industrialization, because without it, we cannot manufacture. Without it, the economy is crippled. So these are the sectors that we look at from an IDC perspective when we fund infrastructure. Lastly, I think for us is just to look at the job creation element of it. As I mentioned, that it's not just about money, but it is also about us getting a social return, as we call it. And that comes in the form of having people working and having people, laying their hands or having ownership and meaningful participation in the economy. So, yeah, I thank you.
Yeah, and very interesting. And I must say, a few questions come to mind. The where of it, for example, because it's not just about mega projects, big infrastructure builds. When we talk about inclusive growth, the where is important, because what about people in Mkanduli or, Umhlabuyalingana, far-flung areas in Pella in the Northern Cape? How do they benefit from all of these infrastructure projects in the main, if we are to take all South Africans with us on this path? But thank you so much. It brings us to Professor Dani Meyer, because your work, and I must say I'm very excited about it. The other thing about us as South Africans, we don't brag enough about our stuff. Learn a lesson from 702. 702 can win a small award. They will blast it cover to cover. And there's nothing wrong with bragging about your stuff. And I'm hoping that we are going to brag about what we are going to hear about now. So, Professor Dani Meyer, talk to us about your research and also why this kind of research is important.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Minister, Senior Manager for Government and colleagues. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, in 2013, I started thinking about indexes and measurement tools at local government, provincial and national. And since then, I've developed 15 measurement tools, how to measure things. For example, how is the enabling environment on a local, provincial, national level for businesses to be successful? So we can measure that, and we have measured it. It's measured in all of the towns in South Africa. It's part of the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor questionnaire that comes out every second year. So we know which towns, which municipalities are doing best in terms of delivering that environment to be successful. For example, we have done the first transformation index in South Africa. We can measure any of the sectors and say how well it's been transferred in terms of employment and ownership of business. So we've done it for a number of sectors already. For example, the tourism sector, we've done it. So there's a number of indexes that we have developed, even a serious game that you can play like Monopoly, and to learn how the economy works in terms of local economic development for councillors, for officials at municipalities, for example. But to come to this inclusive growth index, in 2017, I decided to measure inclusive growth because I've heard the president talking about inclusive growth, the World Bank is talking, but what is it exactly? Nobody's telling us exactly what it is now to measure it. And this is when I started to do it, and I compiled an index of 8 variables to test it, and I compared South Africa with the BRICS countries then, 2017, and then I did 1 or 2 comparisons, and then my wonderful friends at ISA started to speak to me and say, but they want to take this inclusive growth index to local government. And then is when me and Dr. Joint started to work with other colleagues at ISA, and we said, yes, we can bring from national to local government. We've got enough data. Let's build this thing up. And over the last 2 years, we've built it up, and it is. I'm proud of the index, and it can tell us a lot about every municipality in South Africa. It can tell us about the provincial government, what's happening, but it is a spatial plan that shows us what's happening. I have been contacted by a number of municipalities, by the mayors, by the municipal managers. How can we use the index? And it's really very practical. It's not an academic document. We haven't even published the index from an academic point of view. This is a practical thing that we use. And yeah, we're proud of it. I don't know how much detail you want to know about it, but there's 8 variables how to measure it. It's got 3 sub-indexes, for example. We can look at the status quo, the poverty, the inequality, and the dependency ratio. That gives us the foundation. Then there's a second level, the level of participation. For me, that is the definition of inclusive growth. If everybody is participating in the economy, we are in a good state. So participation means, are you part of the production? Do you have a job? Formal or informal, then you're part of the economy. And then the potential to become part of the economy is measured by the infrastructure, the level of availability of education, as well as medical and health services, but also infrastructure, access to infrastructure. That puts you in a position to become part of the economy and participate. If not, you will then participate. So I think that is a good summary of what is the index.
It certainly is, and I was hoping that we would have, that map, at least, just 1 or 2 of them, just to show what this is about. And I'm sure you will get into it next week. As we said, today is a scene setter for what is to come. But I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, it is absolutely, absolutely groundbreaking work. It is fascinating, and it's easy. It's easy to read. You literally look at it and you understand exactly how we have moved, for example, since 1993 to where we currently are in terms of inclusive growth using those 8 measuring indices. So it's something that I hope we will be able to get into. But in the meantime, let me get to Dr. Joint. And Dr. Joint, Infrastructure South Africa, why did you feel the need to get involved with this?
Thank you, and again, good morning to Minister and all our guests. I think it's important. The first reason is inclusive growth is one of the focal areas of a government of national unity. A second point is, in terms of, we have a collaboration agreement with UJ. Index development is one of them, but we took it down to say, but what is the role of infrastructure in inclusive growth? So we decided to look at the benefits. Now, infrastructure on the 8 variables is directly and indirectly involved to at least 5 of those 8 variables. So it plays a critical role. But I think also the other benefit of having an index is to take a complex set of data into an understandable number. So when you see you score a 60, you know it's 60 out of 100. Lots of data behind the scene, and so also on a spatial perspective, it's quite critical to see how does it compare. And I think for me, another very critical element is when you look at pure investment, it's only the metros that shine, because all investment. But when you start looking at inclusive growth, there's a different pattern happening. Some of the rural areas are beating some of the metros, and we need to understand that relationship, because it's three main elements in terms of that. It's both a government, but it's also community and participation. So, industry. So it's not just about government, it's how industry, community, and government interplays in achieving inclusive growth.
And looking at it yesterday and getting ready for today, our next speaker, the executive mayor of Mogale City, was talking about how his municipality has now moved down the ranks. And, Professor Dadi was trying to explain that he had to fix something there. But Mogale City, of course, one of the municipalities that is actually doing better. And we have Mr. Lucky Sele, who's the executive mayor. One of the top municipalities. Talk to us. What are you doing in Mogale City?
Thank you, Sakina. Good morning to the minister, the panelists, and all officials who are part of this engagement today. The index for us, I think, is a call for action to respond to lived experiences of our residents in the city. And over the past decade or so, and if you look at the Inclusive Growth Index as well, the city has done immensely well to respond to some of the issues that were lagging post the democratic South Africa. In terms of responding to issues of water and electricity as required by the Constitution, we've seen a significant improvement in access to that. But we also note the fact that there's also been a number of challenges in terms of the creation of infrastructure and the environment, as well as access to opportunities, particularly for youth, mainly remaining unemployed. So for us, this is a call to action in partnership with Infrastructure South Africa to look at areas of improvement that just as much as were considered as one of the best performing municipalities, but I think Prof made it clear that it's just an average performance. And we need to really work hard to ensure that we improve the lived experiences of the people on the ground. Local government is the closest sphere to all our people who live in our country, and these programs would have a direct impact on them. And we have to look at what are challenges that exist, and of course, this growth index assists us to then, in terms of planning, and the way it's so accurate, we also conduct what we call IDP roadshows, where we engage with residents, and you pick up that these are a number of issues that bother them in terms of unemployment, in terms of infrastructure, and so on. And you know that Mogale City, just as much as is a city that fulfills a residential function to people who are employed in Johannesburg, but part of it is a rural setup, which also has the cradle of humankind. And for it, a number of years has not been developed, and it's a farming area. And you have now people who have been evicted, people who want to live closer to where they work, having set up informal settlements in those particular side of town. And the pressure to ensure that there is infrastructure to deliver services there. And you would know that there are discussions also on the smart city, Minister, the Lanseria Smart City, largely part of it is in the Mogale City area. And one of the challenges is that is the rural part of Mogale City, which has infrastructure challenges. And we really have to focus on ensuring that we put in infrastructure to ensure that that dream is being realized.
And if I could just come back to you, Professor Meyer, with regard to the practical work on the ground, and it was actually quite instructive looking at some of the results of the 10 best performing municipalities in 2023 using your work, and also the worst performing municipalities. Maybe you just want to touch on that, just to give people a sense of how it practically plays out.
Thank you. Yeah, the main reason also for the index is to create awareness. What is inclusive growth? How can we improve your index? We can now prioritize all of the municipalities, we can compare them, and it leads to strategy development. So that is why we did it also. It's not to say that municipality came last, we now need to close it down or whatever. We need to then support those ones. We've got the rural ones, Eastern Cape, KZN, they're really struggling there. They're isolated in terms of infrastructure. But then you've got the well-performing ones, mostly in Gauteng and Western Cape. So I'm not going to point out specific municipalities. Only 5 municipalities in 2023 passed the index, basically,
Let's
above 60.
That. Yeah. What does that mean? They passed above 60.
It means that they're doing well across the board in terms of job creation, infrastructure provision, poverty alleviation, all of the major things that tells us what is inclusive growth. So there's only 5 of them. Gauteng province did well overall, and then obviously the Western Cape are doing well. We didn't look at the quality of local government, and also not the quality of the services that's provided. We only looked at accessibility to services, and then the other 7 variables. What is most important is that Gauteng had the highest index still, and followed by Western Cape, and then the rural provinces are really struggling a lot. So I would like to think about this. Rural South Africa, we need to maintain what we've got, and the growth areas, the metropolitan areas, we need to have as the growth centers of South Africa with infrastructure development is very important. But we need to look after our rural towns. We cannot let it fall down the drain. That will not be good for South Africa. And also, we have identified clusters of growth, which there is a map in the booklet. You will see the green areas. We need to look after those ones. The calculation that is behind it is to see if there's a strong municipal area growing well, does it affect adjacent municipalities? And that is what that map does. We did the calculation. It's fantastic research that was done there with the colleagues. And there's green areas that's growing, and we need to get it bigger and bigger. That the positive growth areas will affect the other ones. Then we've also got these red ones. I call it the cancer of growth. Poor performing ones that's affecting ones next door, becoming also poorly growing regions. So those areas we need to look after, but specifically those green ones, those will be the drivers of growth in South Africa. And I've made a note here while the minister was talking, look, we need one vision, one plan for South Africa, an economic plan. We need to have jobs because that's the cornerstone of the economy. If you haven't got jobs, we cannot have the economy growing. And infrastructure is the driver for it. Logistics and supply chain management doesn't help we produce something for exports, but we cannot get it out quickly. We need to be competitive, and we need to allocate at least 20% of budget to infrastructure. We have got this huge backlog. We now need to catch up urgently, and we need international partners to come in and say, this is the story. We will not get investment if there's policy uncertainty, unfortunately. We need a policy uncertainty, talking from one mouth, saying, this is our plan. We're going to make this, as the minister said, construction site in South Africa. We need it urgently. It's a crisis.
And a really fabulous work. And as we say, going into the symposium next week, I'm hoping everybody will have an opportunity to actually have a look at the work that the University of Johannesburg and Infrastructure South Africa have done. It is absolutely groundbreaking. So, Minister, if I could just bring you in, listening to what Prof. Meyer has to say. The task for government is huge. We spoke about the spend that government has to do when it comes to infrastructure. And it's not something philosophical. It is there, it's right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, Sakina, I think that unless there is an urgent intervention, which we are obviously advocating for, I think the state of decline, particularly in local government, is going to accelerate. And the one thing that I've been blunt about is to identify the worst infrastructure crisis exists in local government, because I'm not convinced that the capacity and capability exists any longer in local government. But it's also how budgets are structured as well. And not to pick on the city of Johannesburg, but the point that I made at the when the president came to the city of Johannesburg, I said the problem is obvious. They've got a 250 billion rand backlog in maintenance on infrastructure and new infrastructure build, but their capital budget is 7.5 billion rand. That's the problem there. So you're never in anyone's lifetime going to get to that. And why has it got to that point? Because I think that the skills and the capacity to deliver those projects has been so eroded in municipalities. And that's why this tool is so crucial for us and links into the work that we're doing in our what we call Adopt a Municipality pilot project, where Infrastructure South Africa is going to work directly with 4 local municipalities to be hands-on in infrastructure delivery to ensure that there is value for money and execution on those projects. And the results in 24 months' time will be really interesting to show that, I'm a big, I advocate for Infrastructure South Africa to be a central point of infrastructure coordination planning in the country, because it's too disorganized at the moment. I'm willing to bet that the outcomes of those pilot projects will be very good, because you will have smart individuals like Dr. Joint with his 2 doctorates, helping the Umgeni local municipality or the Govan Mbeki municipality in Mpumalanga to be able to put these projects together and deliver them. So, we are really taking a different approach to try and say that unless there's going to be a all of government view and execution on this, it's going to get worse. The money is there. Let's be upfront about that. The money is there. It's how the money is spent and how it's procured, and that's why I think that the infrastructure procurement regulations are going to be so critical to make sure that what the state procures in infrastructure, it gets value for. Let me give you a good example by what I mean. It's either Madupi or Kusile, or it could be both. But the overrun in spending on that project is 250 billion rand. Just think about that for a moment. In one project, you overspend by 250 billion rand. And that is just because the way the state procures as the single largest buyer of goods and services is, I think, inefficient. And we've got to drive efficiency in infrastructure procurement so that you can deliver it on time and on budget. So we've got to match the spending, which is definitely there, but to make sure that we actually get the value and that it is targeted, as Prof says, into areas of growth. So we don't just say, well, we're going to spend everywhere. We've got to make sure that we're spending that backs up the growth trajectory and path of the country.
And that inclusive growth, Mr. Cyril, if I can come to you, listening to what Minister is saying, the problems are vast and they are dire in the municipalities. And I promise you, you can go to any municipality in the country when you talk about cost overruns, where people are paying over and over again for the same project. One of the biggest culprits is sports stadia. In any municipality almost, somehow we keep paying for the same stadium that doesn't get finished. So from a local government perspective, Mr. Sele, talk to us about that, because I also want to come to Mr. Manyike about measuring the money, the funding, because this whole thing of throwing good money after bad all the time is problematic. But you've got problems. The infrastructure is falling apart. At the same time, you need to incorporate inclusive growth so that you have a better city.
I mean, in your opening remarks, you referred to the incapacity of local government to respond to maintenance and upgrades. And one of the examples that you made was on the road infrastructure maintenance, that we would even have a national minister even to come to fill potholes. And I think predominantly the problem that exists in local government is the incapacity to take care of the infrastructure that you have. And that in the end results with you having to do the same thing over and over again. But one of the emerging challenges is the challenge of vandalism and theft on critical infrastructure, particularly relating to electricity infrastructure and the wastewater treatment works infrastructure. I mean, the incapacity to provide security on our infrastructure also creates a big problem where you will have to overdo some of the programs and so on. So these areas are areas for improvement that we have noted as the municipality, that we need to provide security, we need to provide maintenance, we need to safeguard the infrastructure that we have, and that requires capacity, building capacity in terms of our municipalities, because most of the time we rely on contracted services. The contractor builds the stadium, the contractor leaves, 5 years down the lines, the stadium is no longer there. So we have to build within the municipality the capacity to be able to maintain this particular infrastructure, because it's an investment. We have seen what has occurred even in terms of transport infrastructure, the railway infrastructure being stripped off and all those particular issues. So we have to be alive to reality, but also step up as local government to resolve these particular challenges. The growth index gives us a guide on how to deal with some of the issues and strategically plan on implementing on some of these issues. But also the issue of fiscal discipline is very important from a local government point of view. I've not been in a municipality that pays salaries with projects money, because it's one of the most we're trying to really run the municipality well. But the fiscal discipline, also looking at what the Auditor General says, has a direct impact on lived experiences of our constituencies in municipalities. So we also have to improve on that, on how do we take care of the resources of the municipality. Planning becomes quite critical. We've seen with challenges with water, when water, there's rainwater maintenance and so on. I must be honest, the municipalities, including ours, is found wanting in terms of planning for this maintenance and ensuring that there's where we can make some provisions in terms of provision of water and so on. So there's a room for improvement, and that is why we're participating in this conversation. And in particular, we'll be participating also at the conference in the coming week, so that we can see how we can improve local government to a standard where it has to be.
I'm just curious. It's one thing to not have the money. Why are you failing to plan?
It's issue of capacity. One of the things that we have to do in local government is to employ the best. But the best are employed in the private sector and not in local municipalities. But that's where you need, in terms of your recruitment, to ensure that you recruit the best, you bring in the best capacity to be able to assist the municipality, put master plans in place and so on. And I think in terms of our recruitment and getting the right personnel also become a critical issue in terms of professionalizing local government and ensuring that it is an institution that is able to deliver to its constituencies. So there's not been a lot of priority given to that, and there's a lot of politics in local government. You've had senior officials, top of the best senior officials leave municipalities because of politics, because of instabilities and so on. And part of the engagement in terms of the Structures Act and stabilizing local government is precisely to look at the issue of how do you professionalize local government and bring in the best personnel to be able to assist our cities.
And become more efficient, and maybe it means pooling resources among municipalities, because if you're unable to plan, there is a municipality that is able to. So maybe looking across. Mr. Manyike, and listening to what the mayor has to say, so security, it's already a funding crisis, and then on top of that, there's the added complexity of now having to secure the infrastructure and the resources that are needed. When you look at funding and funding proposals come to you, for example, how do you factor that in, or do you?
Yeah, thanks for that, Sakina. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges in South Africa, the issue of physical security of our infrastructure. As we have seen in the energy space, cables being stolen, infrastructure being vandalized, etc. So when we do our due diligence before we fund a project, we do what we call risk identification. So those risks will vary from financial to technical to security, etc. Once we have identified those risks, then we have to come to the mitigation, factors of those risks and say, what can be done to mitigate against security risk, for example, and where we feel the security threat is high, we have to put a plan in place to secure that infrastructure, to make sure that it doesn't get vandalized. So that has to be factored in. It's part and parcel of our due diligence process. And where it cannot be mitigated, then there has to be an insurance in place, so that when that undesired eventuality realizes, we are able to then claw back and replace the infrastructure and continue to provide a service to the people.
And which is unfortunate, because you want to spend on the infrastructure and moving forward and not necessarily looking after it to make sure it doesn't walk away. But Dr. Joint, just looking at infrastructure South Africa, again, your involvement and how these interventions are taking place, and also talk to us about, demonstrable success.
Thank you. And maybe I just want to state to Minister that there's even a smarter team behind me. So it's the team, it's not about me. It's a collaborative effort. But thank you. Yeah, I think in terms of interventions and success, success can be measured in different facets. The first one is we need to look at how did the country score in terms of inclusive growth. So on that level, only 5 met the benchmark above 60%. But there's been a measured improvement since 1993. So we measured this index from 1993. What it also showed us that like in external shocks like COVID, it's actually shocking how much COVID influenced the inclusive growth scores, because you couldn't build your infrastructure, people were dying, because we measure all those things. So external shocks is very important to consider, how it impacts. So we need also to take note of that. But in terms of success, it's also for us to start influencing our priority models, because we are now going to implement some of these elements into our priority models. As Minister has alluded to, it's important that there's a pipeline of priority projects on a national scale. And this helps us to create additional criteria that you can actually measure. And the tool then also helps us to identify specific infrastructure requirements. So, because on a national scale, it's always the question, where do you start with your priorities? What is most important? And if you do it just based on your opinion, then it's not going to fly. So we need to start engaging with data analytics. And this is an important tool in order to make sure that we can then prioritize and make sure that the outcomes are successful. As I said, this is early days to measure the success. The tool will now be applied. So in a year's time, I think we can already start looking at successes. But for me, the other successful outcome of the research is also, as I mentioned earlier, how specific rural areas like the mining towns and agricultural towns, how they actually scored very high. And one can learn a lot from that. So that's also the next focal area of our project, is to unpack and disaggregate these findings even further. It's all municipalities, so it's a lot of information, but we will now target specific points of interest in order to make sure that once we start with those models and implementation, that the outcomes will be successful.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. And I think I'm going to now give an opportunity to those in the room and those joining us online to ask some questions as well. And I'm going to start with Mr. Manyike. I have one here for you. How does the IDC balance financial sustainability with developmental impact when evaluating infrastructure projects in the context of inclusive growth?
I think, firstly, we just need to acknowledge our dual mandate as a DFI, one being development impact, and on the other hand is financial sustainability. And as you can imagine, these are two difficult, balls to juggle, and they are not mutually exclusive, unfortunately. It is a challenge, right? But looking at the fact that as a South African DFI, and I think it's the same for all of them, we are not capitalized on an annual basis by government. What that means is we need to be self-funded. We need to go out in the market, we raise funding, or we use our surpluses to create a capital base for us to be able to, continue to do our developmental work. And what that means is, in order for us to do that effectively, we need to have a good credit rating, which will give us cheaper sources of funding that we can then pass on to our project owners or project sponsors, and that makes the project viable. So how we then balance that is we are selective in terms of the projects that we take. So a project needs to be viable, doesn't need to be astronomically profitable, but at least it needs to be able to pay for itself and sustain itself. So that's what we look at. And in order for us to do that again, we need to do what we call project development. Do feasibility studies for the project because that helps with unlocking or crowding in private capital. And we also, leverage of blended finance structures because we need to be innovative in terms of how we fund this project, bringing in different sources of funding that will make the project work. For example, leveraging of the critical infrastructure program of the DTIC, the black industrialist schemes, etc., in order for us to make the project work. And if we take that, blend it with commercial funding, and in some cases even concessional funding that we get from some of our partners, that brings the cost of the project down from a financing cost point of view, and the project can become a bit more viable. So this is a very difficult, balance for us to maintain.
Thanks, Ms. Manyike. Any questions in the room? All right, we have a few. So perhaps we can start with the lady in the front. There's a mic. That's a mic that's going to come to you. Thank you.
Thank you and greetings to everyone. My name is Rishoka Maipa and I'm from Infrastructure South Africa. I guess I'm curious and just lumping on what you were saying, Sakina, that there isn't much noise in this technique or tool that the team has come up with. I'm just curious to know what are the future plans in rolling out this technique to the local government? And I'm asking this just looking at also what the minister was saying. Are we looking at a centralized approach and how it's going to be rolled out, or it's going to be a tool that is going to be available to those that deem it necessary in their plans and going to benefit realization? And just secondly, what I'd like to know is maybe from the mayor is, do you think that this tool can be adopted as one of the insightful tools to consider when you do the 5-year IDPs? And do you think it's going to be beneficial before when you're doing the plans and when you do the reviews on an annual basis? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Maepia. And I am a firm believer in answering the questions when they are asked, because otherwise we just lose focus. So if we could, let's start with Professor Meyer first, and then Mr. Meyer.
I'll start, and Dr. Join can also add. Look, our future plans for the LGIGI, as we call it, and this is the first edition. It's a growing index. We're always going to look at it and see how we can improve it. It's not perfect yet, but we're working on more variables and testing of things. So the second edition will be available this year even, the updated one, maybe end of the year or so. And we would like to, we have done a lot of work to get it out there. They always say the research, how do you get it out there? But I think that the minister knows about it now, that the cabinet should be knowing about this. We are doing a round table for LED process through Kagiso Trust and UJ, that we're going to create a toolkit for local government to use it. So it's going to be an LED toolkit to do strategies, to use this, and to create their own strategies, to train people to do. So that's something that we are planning. There's future indexes that we're looking at, definitely in terms of infrastructure and governance, as well as investment. The type of investment at local government, who's investing in which sectors. I believe the economic-based sectors is the ones we need to invest in. It is agriculture, mining, manufacturing, and tourism. Those are the ones that can create jobs. The others are supporting services. They are supporting the main economic-based sector. So those are the most important ones. Dr. Joint, maybe add to what we're doing?
Thank you, Dani. And yes, to answer my own colleague, the intention is also to revisit our admission model at ISA to see how we can integrate some of these results or into the admission model, but also in terms of our prioritization. As I mentioned previously, we will definitely include this in the prioritization. You get different levels of priority. So it will also depend on whether it will be on a strategic level or what level we will include these findings. But I think it's also just as important to mention that this report will also be available on our online the ISA website, so that people can engage. Unfortunately, there was a bit of a technical delay in displaying the maps and so on, and I think it's critical that people also see how things changed over time and how certain areas are clustering. So yeah, this is critical information for prioritization.
And I think when we find a moment, we'll take a minute or two just to look at an example of that. But just to repeat a point that I made earlier to the team, if you are not telling us about, if we don't know about it, it's just as well as it didn't happen.
Yeah.
You have to get the message out there. You have to tell people about what you do. And I say this about government all the time. You could be doing great work. If we don't know about it, you might as well not have done it. So it's very important. So from a media perspective, definitely something that I think we would want to pick up on as well. Mayor Sene?
I think that most of the issues relating to our IDPO shows, top 5 ranging to top 10 issues, are mainly subjects that are scored by the index. So our communities are concerned about those particular issues in terms of employment creation, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of education, facilities, and so on, public health issues. So it's a data-driven index that gives you an opportunity to measure yourself, that are you able to respond to the needs of the communities that you are serving. So it becomes quite a critical component of our integrated development plan. And I hope in future we'll be able to then be able to solidify the partnership between local municipalities and Infrastructure South Africa. Because the problem with integrated development plan is that ourselves as the political leadership, we do roadshows, take inputs, and then inputs from communities are being shelved.
Yes.
But this gives them then an opportunity to say, what are you doing about these issues that are really concerning your communities? So the variables that are being utilized in terms of the index are precisely what is or what are the needs of the community in terms of the integrated development plan. And it's important that we put it together and work and really find sustainable solutions from our communities.
Yeah, and what I love about it is that it now gives you the opportunity to measure. So you can't just come and tell us, from who knows where, what you think the inclusive growth trajectory is. We can actually see it. So that is what you will now have to respond to, Mr. Mayor and Minister.
If I can just say, Sakina, I think the part of the problem we have in South Africa is information is not easily understood by the public. So, IDPs are great, but, whoever takes the time to read them or actually understand what it means for their community. And what I like about this is that it's very practical, it's easily understood, it's not 100 metrics, it's 8. And so the public can actually start to engage with their local representatives in their municipality and say, you're doing well or you're not doing so great. And I think that we have to conceptualize as a government as to how we interact with the public in information. I was told there's a metro whose the financial budget that they want to present for public comment is 1,000 pages. 1,000. The officials in that municipality have not even read 1,000 pages there. And I think that that sort of thing isn't helpful. And I think sometimes it can be deliberate, so it's to package information, so people can't fully understand it. But, transparency is absolutely key, particularly when it comes to public spending and what it is being spent on, and whether, in fact, that spend relates to growth.
Yeah.
So, you can spend, your entire budget, but have you actually spent it on, growth projects, growth development? Are you spending it in the right areas? And so I think that these sorts of tools are going to be crucially important. I'm committed to taking this to Cabinet. So I think that Cabinet needs to fully understand what this means and how it can refine our thinking, particularly now that we are moving into a new budget cycle. Departments are looking at their budgets. So I think that these sorts of tools, as simplistic as this is, notwithstanding the immense research that's gone into it, is the kind of direction we should be heading in.
And I couldn't agree more, because it's so simple. You look at it And I think I used the word heat map earlier because it kind of is. By just looking at it, you can see where the growth is happening and where it isn't happening. And you don't have to go and read boring reports that nobody really wants to get into. So absolutely. At the back, ma'am?
Thank you very much, Sakina. My name is Sekadi Payane Shahani. I'm from the South African Institution of Civil Engineering. I just have a question around institutional capacity challenges that the Minister and the Mayor alluded to. The Engineering Council of South Africa says there's one engineer to every 3,200 people in South Africa, which is very low compared to what we have internationally, to 1 to 100. And what we are finding in our studies that it's not just a shortage of skills within the public sector, but it's also related to people, within the technical fields who have little experience, who are not being mentored properly, who are not professionally registered. And in line with the Council of the Built Environment's agenda to professionalize the built environment and to ensure that people who are technical are professionally registered, I just want to ask the Mayor, in terms of Mogale City, what programs have you put in place, seeing that your municipality is achieving and it's quite high on the index compared to others, in relation to ensuring that your staff in the technical capacity are empowered and they're on the road to registration and fulfilling what they're supposed to as professionals and being able to be held accountable as well as professionals. Thanks.
Mayor Sele?
No, thank you. I think I want to start with where the problem lies before I particularly deal with the question. And I think part of the problem is that if I go to school to be a doctor and I open my own practice, I can only open it as a doctor. If I go to school to study law and open my own practice, I can only open it as a lawyer. But if I want to go to construction, infrastructure development, I can do it with grade 8 and go build across the country and be afforded those particular opportunities without even having minimum competence in terms of engineering skills. I just need the CIBD, grading, and all those particular issues. So I think professionalizing the engineering sector, particularly in terms of building infrastructure, is not enough only to say that the company must have engineers and then there are CVs of people they provided and so on, but the owner of that particular company is not competent to do that particular work. And then in terms of the city, there's one important program that we've had over the past 15 years, and I'm part of a product of that particular program in terms of the mayoral bursary scheme. And we continue to offer mayoral bursary scheme to young people in the city who wish to go to school, particularly in this field or areas where we need technical expertise, so that they are able to come back home and are incubated into the municipality and be able to work within the municipality. But we also ensure that in terms of our recruitment, in terms of engineers, we recruit the best in terms of our infrastructure department. And over the past few years, we have been lagging until we had a situation with our wastewater treatment works. And we see that you actually need the best in that particular field to be able to assist you, not only the best in terms of senior management, but also in terms of junior officials who work on those particular sites, who take samples, and so on and so forth, need to be people who are competent to do that particular job. So in terms of our human resource division, we do the best of our capacity, try to offer support to our engineers within the city. But the food for thought is the fact that the engineering infrastructure sector is just open to everybody out there with a CIBD grading.
Mm. I know you want to follow up on that because of what is being said, but let's keep it for next week. Let's leave something to take forward from here, because I just want to ask a quick question, Mayor Sele. A few weeks ago, I had an interview with the minister, and one of the things that he shared with us was that there's only one company that has been blacklisted. Maybe you just want to quickly share that.
One company that's been blacklisted in 20 years.
In 20 years, one company blacklisted, and yet the country is littered with projects that are abandoned, that are poorly done, shoddy work, and yet in 20 years, only one company has been blacklisted. And food for thought there, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the projects in your municipality. Sir?
Good morning to the panel. Good morning, everyone. I see the model really, my name is Abdul Baba from Infrastructure South Africa. The success of the model really be based on the data we add going forward. So I think the intention would be to add a benchmark world-class cities as well as metro data. I'm sure the intention is to add that to ensure have a better picture of where we stand as from a measurement perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Join?
Yes, again, one of my colleagues. So everybody's contributing.
Does no one talk to each other? Send an email or WhatsApp. You have to wait for a thing like this to ask each other questions. It's a bit bizarre.
It's astonishing. But no, it shows contribution and interest. Again, that's part of our future work. So we did not want to focus too much on international for this first edition. But the intention is naturally to also see the benchmarks. As Prof. Dani alluded to, he's done work on South Africa compared to SADC countries. So at least we have that benchmark so we can already measure. Maybe I can just mention some similar work that we did on a road access index. The World Bank did the index comparing South Africa to the rest of the world. Again, it's one benchmark with no spatial context. This team used 10 million data points to develop a road access index for the entire country up to ward level. So we've got the heat map. We like the word heat map. So that it shows you on the country, the entire country, where are the red areas and where are the areas of good accessibility. And you can also get substantial information from that. For instance, you can also see those rural areas, some less than 10% of the population is classified as good access. I will not go into the technical details, but those areas still, 9 of the 10 worst locations in the country had a positive population growth. So the argument is always, you can't ignore rural. You must, we still have 18 million rural population. So again, all this is relevant, all this is integrated. We actually had offline discussion to say, but we will definitely add more infrastructure-related data because, we are also bound with when you develop an index, you must make sure data is available annually, it's updated annually. It doesn't help you use a good source that's once off, because then you can do nothing with that data set going forward.
But definitely there's scope, and I'm sure these are things that will develop. Where's the mic?
Yeah.
It's on this side.
Thank you, panelists. My name is Martin Bangwenya from Vutomi Energy. We are an independent power producer based in Mpumalanga, where we are currently developing a gas-fired power plant in the Komati Port Special Economic Zone. It's a 3,000 megawatt power plant, but we're starting off with a phase 1 of 800 megawatts. And just focusing on the topic of inclusive growth, which is something that's critical to our own organizational policy, is with the technology that we'll be bringing in with this project, it will be a one-of-a-kind, not only for the country, but for that community as well. Komati Port is an agricultural space, cross-border, just across with Mpumalanga. And when we look at inclusive growth with technology that is new to them, immediately we have a challenge in terms of available skills to take on the work. So a bulk of that work will be internationals or even senior engineers, even from around other companies outside of Komati Port or even Bombela as an example. But we will have that challenge in terms of inclusive growth during that space. We are in development space. However, when we look at now inclusive growth on a long term, are we only focusing, I mean, just going back to the model, are we looking at inclusive growth during construction of infrastructure projects or long term? As it is as an organization, our aim is to make sure that we even build a technology school that we say, look, every year we'll take on 100 students from that community. The plant will last 20, 30, 50 years, and we need to know that there are skilled people locally to be able to work on that plant, on a maintenance procedure, either on maintenance or even during construction. Construction may take about 36 to 48 months, as based on the model of the project itself. But in terms of how we can prepare that community, Minister, as you're talking about, how do we communicate to municipalities, the public, about these things to prevent vandalism that's happening in municipalities, to say, community, here's an opportunity that's coming up for you in the next 3 to 5 years. You need to prepare yourself with these key set skills. Don't study this type of engineering, focus on this skill so that you know that you will be able to sustain yourself and your family on a long-term run. So I just wanted to ask if maybe does this model look at forecasting opportunities for different communities so that they need to prioritize set skills for themselves so that even when big infrastructure projects come by, there are enough people there versus now it being a 90-10 or not the 30% local participation that's base required. Yeah, just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a comment. All right. Perhaps Prof. Dani will take a bite at that as we move the mic this way.
Yeah, I think it's more of a comment, but I can tell you that in South Africa there is a lot of jobs for highly skilled people, but we haven't got the supply. Supply side is not good enough, so we haven't got highly skilled people anymore. Most of them have gone somewhere else, and then we've got a lot of unskilled people, but there's no jobs for them. So that is the challenge that we've got in South Africa for education. There's not enough people that is trained in high-level technical skills. There's a lot of people going to university and they are getting jobs, but there's a lot of people that doesn't get that access to universities. There's the TVET colleges, but that quality is not where it should be. So we need to improve some of our education levels, but you need a skill. And we can also look in terms of the index at highly skilled, medium skilled, low skilled, and add that as another layer in the index. We have got the data for that. Per municipality we can do it, per sector we can do it. So we can delve deeper and deeper into this thing, and we just started with the, let's say, one layer of it. Now we're going to go deeper and deeper. We can go into Johannesburg municipality and divide it into 8 regions and do the same story for that. So we can go deeper and deeper into things, but we didn't want to be caught out by going too much, get lost in the data. As the Dr. Hubert say, there's like, how many 10 million data sets that we've used, big data. But it's true that we need more highly skilled people to drive the economy.
Just a quick word, Dr.
Just in terms of the model uses published data, so it uses historic data. But what you are talking is very important in terms of demand forecasting. I suggest we have economic models that can also assist with that. That's outside the focus of a model, but there might be elements of a model that we can use in the forecasting, because you also now have a trend analysis for forecasting purposes. So definitely relevant. I think we can just have a discussion outside.
And Minister will take the skills issue to cabinet. Yes, sir.
It's like a shopping list I'm taking.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Minister. My name is Friedrich Slabbert. I'm the President 2025 of the South African Institute of Civil Engineering. What we have discussed here is very close to our heart, our life, our passion. First, we started to discuss infrastructure, and it's absolutely true. It is the backbone of society. And wherever I go, I'm reminding engineers that we are not building projects, we are building society. First comment just to remember. We've spoken about funding, because without funding, we are not going to build anything. Then the index is telling us where we have institutional limitations, but I haven't heard much about the engineering part, because except for Meyer, who said there are some contractors that can, and we've heard it a number of times, that anyone can be an engineer when they become a contractor. That is the element that is really a big concern. But we as engineers also, like Infrastructure South Africa and Prof. Dani, we love indices. We work with a lot of data, and we convert that data into science to give us solutions. So we want to not talk about the problem, but about how we implement solutions. But out of these indices that we've developed, we also issue an infrastructure report card every 5 years about all sectors: power, ICT, roads, water, etc. One problem that we have is that many municipalities and provinces refuse to share their data, although it's actually public data, because they are afraid that we are going to shame them. But some of that deeper investigations showed us that we need, in 2022, 1 trillion rand to fix the poor and very poor roads in the country. More or less the same number to fix the poor and inappropriate water systems in the country. Now, immediately you can see now I'm getting back to the funding matter. And if we want to create jobs in terms of maintenance in the rural areas, this is the easiest way or the quickest way. Number one, to build the capacity in local government. Number two, to create engineering skills in the rural environment, and to fix our infrastructure. The next comment and question I have is to the Minister in particular. You need to please support us. We really need to start talking not about projects. Because once the project is built, it became an asset. That asset is not disappearing. Let me use a very good example: the Vaal Dam, the Harib Dam, all the roads that we have, they don't disappear. They need constant improvement to accommodate growth in the economy and change. I always use this very basic argument. If I have a clinic in a rural environment and there's no water, that clinic doesn't help. If I have a school in a rural environment, but the kids can't get to school, we have a problem. If I have a farmer with tomatoes and the road condition is so poor, then the tomatoes get to the market, it's tomato sauce, then we have a problem. So, Minister, is it possible that we, in some way or another, can start thinking about recognizing the engineering fraternity around the table of discussions? I've, in person, put my name forward, threw it in a hat, and hope that we can, as representative of the engineering industry, we are willing to serve. We are serving. The second question is, isn't it time that we start thinking life cycle in terms of finance? Yes, we start with a pre-feasibility study, feasibility study, then we have procurement, and we appoint a contractor and a consultant, and we build something. But then there's very little happening for the remaining of the next 40 years.
Okay.
Can't we get a maintenance budget ring-fenced for infrastructure?
I'm just going to take one last question at the back, because I know Minister has to go. So just to accommodate that and give Minister a last word.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry. Duret Lochenberg from ISA. Recently, or not recently, over the past 3 years, we've been doing quite a bit of work in the Gamagara mining corridor in the Northern Cape. While doing our work there, we found something called the Municipal Capability Partnership Program, largely driven by Anglo, Their mandate sits within COGTA. I think for Prof. Meyer, I think this is a model that we should really look at in terms of where private sector comes in. I've seen improvements in blue drop status. We've seen reduction in water losses. And I think there's significant value in actually expanding this program. Within that corridor as well, for the first time, we have post-mine closure strategies for the resilience of these settlements post-mining. And I think if we look at this valuable tool developed by Isa and Dr. Joint's team, could this be something that we could use to track the success of those strategies? Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. And that's it. So I'm going to use this opportunity as well, just to give everyone an opportunity to give us their closing remarks. So, Minister, if you could just hold off, let me start with Mr. Manyika and make our way down.
All right, thanks. I think maybe let me close off with the question that I think you asked right at the beginning regarding where these projects are happening. To mention that, you know, our approach in infrastructure funding follows a localization plan. And we're doing this to ensure that we source as much as possible material from the local communities and also build industrial capacity in the country to make sure that we don't import as much, but we can use our own local staff internally. And then secondly, we also encourage, you know, local participation by funding community trusts. And I think that's one of the best ways to sort of benefit the communities within which you operate. And I think that can apply also in your renewable project, where you bring in communities and have them have a stake
I'm going to ask you to park it there, because remember, this is just the curtain raiser. There's a symposium coming.
Don't put all your cards on the table. We have a long poker match to get through.
Yeah. And Professor Dani?
Very quickly, just last words. I think the mining towns, we already said, they are at the top, some of them at the top of the index. We're going to drill deeper into what's happening there, what's the good things, because the mines are investing a lot, and that's why they're doing so well. Second point is, local government is in a crisis. We need to turn the ship urgently. 70% of them bankrupt or nearly bankrupt, so we need to implement whatever we can as quickly as possible. I think we have a grown confidence with the GNU, and we need to look after it. The investment will come. If we get stable governance at this point of time, we've got enough money. We need to spend it correctly. Gauteng government has sent back 1 billion, but we've got 1 billion potholes. Crazy. Okay. Last one. We have got enough funding. UJ is funding me. I've got enough funding. If there's projects, please bring it. We will do it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very happy about SAIC also asking questions. They're also a collaboration partner of ours. So we do take note of the engineering input. We're also developing a construction development index that we will also launch in due course. It's disaggregated up to a provincial level. And then, also just the last, in terms of, we're busy with infrastructure governance index, which is also critical to ensure that governance improves. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joint. Mayor Sele?
Thank you. I think from the perspective of Mohale City, which is an urban city center that lies the west of Gauteng, is an important opportunity for us to collaborate and for partnership to be able to respond to living experiences, quality of life, and the challenges that our constituents are going through every day. So we're grateful that we have a measurement tool to work against, and we embrace the challenge and ensure that we will respond to those pillars that categorize the index and also our IDP in terms of our community inputs.
Thank you, Mayor. Minister.
Thank you, Sakina. And I think, as you said, this is a good curtain raiser. I'm looking forward to more discussions next week. Suffice to say that, without engineers, you can't build anything. So the problem is most of them in Dubai at the moment. And the reason why they're in Dubai is because, we have so few projects that are actually being delivered on time. So, I mean, that's the challenge to us, is to make sure that we get a credible pipeline. And I think the projects that we're going to announce on Tuesday with the President are continually building confidence into that. But, I mean, all I can say is I look forward to seeing everyone there. And, we need to have some important discussions on important issues. Growth versus inclusive growth. I have some views and thoughts, whether in fact the concept of inclusive growth is actually stopping us from growing. I think that there could be, a paradox.
That's interesting.
In that. But we'll have those discussions.
Indeed.
We'll try and find our way through.
So, Minister Dean McPherson and the rest of our panel, the Mayor of Mogale City, Mr. Lucky Sele, Dr. joined from Infrastructure South Africa from the University of Johannesburg, Professor Meyer, and of course, Mr. Manyike from IDC. Thank you so much to our esteemed panel and to everybody who was here. This was just, getting the wheels going for the symposium that will take place next week. And of course, I think I'm salivating at the prospect of some of the discussions that will take place. So you've had the prelude. Enjoy next week. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.